It's great to see you here. And welcome to the Poverty, Promise, and Possibility Initiative's first community forum here at the School of Social Service Administration at the University of Chicago. It's just terrific to see all of you out here this evening. I hope you'll all be joining us again and again and again for future events in the Poverty, Promise, and Possibility Initiative. There are catalogs out there. If you look up under Civic Knowledge Project, you'll get a listing of other events coming up. More speakers, another community forum in April. Hope you'll all join us again. I'm Bart Schultz. I'm the director of the Civic Knowledge Project. We're one of the many partners putting together the Poverty, Promise, and Possibility Initiative. This is a pretty big collaboration. It involves the Civic Knowledge Project, School of Social Service Administration, Office of Civic Engagement, Graham School of General Studies, Urban Education Institute. It's the group that runs the U of C charter schools. So we've all been working together to put this program in the best possible shape to really make some headway on a very, very urgent problem that we're all too well aware of, urban poverty, poverty here on the south side of Chicago, how to understand it, how to take practical measures to combat it. Very important initiative, and as I said, I believe we'll be continuing it next year, and I hope you'll keep joining us again and again and again. Particularly pleased that we have so many community partners here tonight, and I want to thank them as well for joining us, because really this isn't just about the University of Chicago departments, the Civic Knowledge Project, and so on. It's very much a collaboration with lots and lots of community groups, leaders, organizations. In fact, it's the organizations from the Woodlawn community who will be leading the discussion tonight, and I'm going to introduce them in a minute. First, though, I'd like to take an opportunity to thank a few people here. Professor Bonnie Harrison, where'd you get? There she is. Big hand for her. Right. From Kennedy King College. She brought so many of her students here. It's wonderful to see you. I really expect you all to be asking the tough questions here this evening. Speak up. This is really something we hope you'll participate in. Also, Shaz Razul, the Neighborhood Schools Project. I have a lot of your students here. That's great. He's asked me to remind the students with the Neighborhood Schools Project to be sure to sign the sheet over there on the table before you leave, so we can keep track of you. We have Denard Jaycox here, leader of the Faithful Few, wonderful organization, does sporting activities, getting young ladies off the streets, and involved in these activities. We just had an excellent fundraiser, the African American Bazaar, a couple of weeks ago. So, and lots of others here. If I don't thank you tonight, I'll thank you the next time around. I think we had better get tonight's discussion rolling. So, all too quickly here, let me introduce our distinguished panelists. First, immediately to my left, Samuel E. Dyson. He's the Associate Director of the Woodlawn Children's Promise Community here in Woodlawn. Instrumental figure in this crucial initiative that's going to bring to Woodlawn the kind of anti-poverty initiative that has gotten so much attention in Harlem, Jeffrey Canada's Harlem Children's Promise Zone. Mr. Dyson is a very distinguished educator with degrees from Harvard, winner of a Golden Apple Award. He knows a lot about education and what kind of educational activities a Promise Zone really needs to implement. I'm going to call your attention to a book here. This is Paul Tuff's Whatever It Takes, Jeffrey Canada's Quest to Change Harlem and America. In some ways, it's Jeffrey Canada's work in Harlem that started this whole thing, the Poverty, Promise, and Possibility Initiative. That has served as a model for community engagement, anti-poverty efforts in urban areas. I encourage everyone to take a look at this book. But you'll be learning a lot about the equivalent of the Harlem Children's Promise Zone going on in Woodlawn this evening. Next up, Mr. Rudy Nimitz. He is really the South Side ambassador Technically, his title is Director of Community Partnerships for the Office of Civic Engagement here at the University of Chicago. But he's really one of the senior statesmen of Woodlawn. He has been living, how long have you been living over there? On
1952.
Same place since 1952, just around the corner over here. Had a distinguished career in the Chicago Police Department. Did a stint in charge of the organized crime unit. Led the University of Chicago's security forces for decades after that. Before retiring to assume his current role as community ambassador for the university. He knows a tremendous amount about the problems of youth violence, urban poverty, especially from a practical, experiential perspective. So, very glad to have him here to share his experience. Next up, James Dodson. He is the chairman of Metro Squash. I won't explain what that is. He's going to do it, but it could be a very important institution here in Woodlawn and on the south side. It already is nationally in many other locations. He's also the CEO of Akili Audio, founding director of the Black College Communications Association, a very important figure in communications, new media, and so forth for black colleges. On the board of trustees of the Ancona School, one of the best Montessori schools anywhere, located right here on the south side. So another experienced educator with a lot to share. And last, and as the saying goes, not least, in the least little bit, Cherie Garmany Miller, who's the Director of Community Outreach for the Akarama Foundation, the Community Service Center, located just a few blocks away over at Ingleside and 63rd. Akarama is one of the leading black sororities in the country. They do this absolutely fantastic educational work. They are building community here every day, in every way. Their organization is the kind of infrastructure that is going to make Promise Zone efforts work. So she's going to tell you about how the Akarama Foundation is meshing with these other efforts tonight. I hope that's right. Yep. I'll close with that. If you have any questions about future programs, dates, times, suggestions, follow-up activities, please feel free to contact me. My name is in that brochure, the Graham School catalog out there, but I'll also give you my email. It's just rschultz, R-S-C-H-U-L-T-Z, at uchicago.edu. I really want to hear from you. We do have a website based on this initiative, http://poverty initiative, all one word, povertyinitiative.uchicago.edu. You can find a lot of information up on the website, so please do check that out as well. So a big hand, if you please, for Mr. Samuel Dyson.
Good evening. Thank you, Bart, and thank you to everyone at the University of Chicago who's made this event possible. I'm honored to represent the Woodlawn Children's Promise community and to tell you a little bit about our work. There are a lot of knowledgeable others in the room, including Mr. Nimox, who's a board member and obviously been committed to the community for much longer than I've been alive, let alone longer than I've been in the community working on this initiative. The Woodlawn Children's Promise community, to give you a brief history, actually grew out of an initiative whose roots are earlier than the current popularity of the Harlem Children's Zone. Could you just raise your hand if you have heard, other than Bart's introduction, about the Harlem Children's Zone? Okay. So the origin of this initiative was actually in a neighborhood strategic planning initiative called the Quality of Life Planning Project. The New Communities program requires any of the neighborhoods, and there are about a dozen neighborhoods in Chicago, any neighborhood that takes on an NCP program needs to engage in this strategic planning process for the community. They pull people in the community together, ask them what the issues are that are of most importance to the community, and it was from that the Woodlawn Children's Promise Zone originally, and now Woodlawn Children's Promise Community was born, with the goal of radically improving education in the neighborhood. Our model is informed in a great way by the federal Promise Neighborhood program, which requires neighborhoods like ours to develop continuums of service that provide programs and supports for kids from the time they are born, even preceding birth, for example, through the Harlem Children's Zone Baby College, to the time that they go on from high school to college and from college on to careers. We have some key partnerships there that I just want to mention. Our offices are actually in Apostolic Church because the founding chair of the board was the late Bishop Arthur Brazier, who recently passed, and we are thankful to his leadership for our start. I just want to give you a little intro to Woodlawns. I can see that much of this may be too small for you to read, and in fact, if you have trouble reading any of this and want to get copies of the presentation afterwards, we can make sure that you get it. The neighborhood of Woodlawn actually is the neighborhood we're in. 60th Street, right outside the window, is the northern boundary of the neighborhood. And we work with 10 schools in that neighborhood. In fact, we work with, among those are 2 schools that are not actually in the boundaries of Woodlawn, but serve many of the students who live there. And 9 of those schools are CPS public elementary schools. A 10th is the University of Chicago Charter School at Woodlawn. And there is an 11th school that we hope to build a relationship with, and that's Hyde Park Academy, the one public high school in the neighborhood. To give you a little bit of background about the neighborhood, essentially by many measures, it is a neighborhood facing challenges. One such measure is the percentage of families who are referred to as multi-system families. That is, families who are connected to 2 out of 5 public systems: foster care, substance abuse and treatment, mental health service, juvenile incarceration, and adult incarceration. And in Woodlawn, the map there on the upper right shows the variation of the census tracts in Woodlawn according to the percentage of families that are coded multi-system families that are connected to 2 or more of those public systems. And the range in the percentage among these census tracts in Woodlawn is from 15 to as many as 62% of the families being connected to multiple public services. There are also some statistics up here just about the percentage of teenage mothers in the community as compared to the city, and infant mortality is high. Housing is an area that's challenged in the community. As I say, on many measures, Woodlawn is a neighborhood facing lots of challenges. To give you a snapshot of the schools, the picture is similar. I actually want to draw your attention to the second to last bullet point on this list, that according to some recent data from 2007 and 8, that of the 9 public CPS elementary schools that we work with, only 2 had ISAT exceeds levels that were above 4%. The difference between ISAT meets and exceeds is actually pretty significant. A lot of people talk about how many of the students in a particular school are meeting state standards on testing. In fact, meeting state standards is not a helpful benchmark if you're trying to determine how students are going to perform when they get to high school. In fact, to be assured just a 50% chance of scoring well on the high school ACT exam, students need to be able to at least be at the level of exceeds in elementary school, and only 2 of our schools had more than 4% of their students doing that. So these are schools that certainly need support. And it's a largely African-American community, as you may know, and that's reflected in our schools as well. The schools in the Woodlawn Children's Promise community are listed there on the bottom. So there are 3 areas in which we're trying to do work. And we think about our work according to the language of the promise child, which is language that we actually got from the principals with whom we work. In our conversations with them, we have attempted to figure out what we as an initiative are doing in the neighborhood. What's the essential piece of our work? And they have raised up the importance of this idea of a promised child. That is, the work that we do ought to nurture students who look different, speak differently, engage differently in their community and beyond. And the work we do with the promised child you can think of as youth development, but there are other tiers as well. The school development or promise educator, and community development, the promise family. And I'll just tell you briefly about some work that we do in each of those 3 areas. So this is a snapshot of what a promised child means in the definition of our Woodlawn instructional leaders, the principals. And again, if you can't read all the words, you should be able to see the words in bold that pop out to you. Leaders, problem solvers, courteous, that they're sensitive to diversity and appreciate and understand and respect it, and that they are headed someplace to college, career, and impacting society in significant ways. So how do you actually develop a program that nurtures those kind of students? We have a reading program which students have named Promising Young Leaders and Readers. And it grew out of essentially a tutoring initiative where adults would be paired with students and would read to those students to help build their literacy skills. But it turned out that in the process of trying to recruit adults to do this work, that we had challenges, and so used some older elementary school and high school students to mentor younger elementary students. And when we looked at the data, it turned out that the gains among the younger students being read with were actually greater when they were paired with another student than when they were paired with an adult, which nurtures leadership both among the older students and a connection to them from the younger students. So I just wanted to actually show a clip, if I could, of a video just talking about this program, just 2 minutes of it, so you can hear from some of the students themselves.
Slowly they crept out inch by inch.
When I was younger, I had a lot of problems reading, so it's like, well, I should come help some kids, you know. But I figure it's gonna be hard, you know. Maybe it's some stuff I won't understand. But then I've learned a lot from them, and they've learned a lot from me.
Well, the tutoring program we started last school year, and this is an opportunity for our 8th graders to tutor kindergartners. And again, we're building capacity, we're building leadership capacity amongst those 8th graders and having them connect with those kindergartners. So we're through this tutoring program able to connect an 8th grader with a kindergartner.
Last year the program started, they wanted us to have adults come in from the community and other areas to tutor the kindergarten and 1st grade students. That was our biggest struggle, is that we couldn't get enough people to commit to the time. There's a lot of people who wanted to, but with their work schedules and their busy lives it didn't quite work. So we thought that the most captive audience we had were our own students. So that's why we started talking to the 8th graders and got them involved and excited, and it's actually probably one of the most successful programs I think we've had here.
When I was real little in kindergarten and stuff, I didn't really like asking for help, and so having the opportunity to help a kindergarten made me feel good, so they would feel free to ask for help.
My favorite thing to do in school is read, and I love children, so I mean, why not do something I love with somebody I love to do it with? My thoughts was like I could really make this child successful, make them a better person, and, you know, like, make them, you know, be more than what they want to be.
When I was younger and I got tutored, meeting new people, meeting older people was like, they were cool, so I was like, maybe I got some more kids to look up to me.
That's the promised child. Somebody who understands their value and the value of another and realizes that we're going to do this work only by doing it together. And that's just one example of a program that we're doing, thanks to the staff that have worked incredibly hard to make it happen. But we're also doing school development. We realize that programs don't actually change schools when they are disconnected from an overall effort to change the school itself. And so we're driven by the work of the Chicago, the Consortium of Chicago School Research just down the street in Chapin Hall. Their research says that there are 5 essential supports that lead to school improvement, and that when schools are strong on at least 3 of these, that it makes those schools, data shows, 10 times more likely to improve or to avoid stagnation. And so we meet with principals after their schools, their teachers, and their students have taken surveys to reveal how strong their schools are in these 5 areas. And one of the ways in which we can help as a community-based organization is that, in fact, one of the keys to school success is family and community engagement. It's one of the 5 essential supports. But schools are often unable on their own in isolation to actually improve those things. And so that's one of the ways in which a community-based organization can really offer assistance to significant school improvement. And the last tier is this level of the promised family, of community development. That, again, we have to be able to engage the community. And one of the ways in which we do that, there are a couple different programs that are listed here, but one of the ways in which we do that is through a parent leadership initiative in partnership with Youth Guidance. The goal of that is to bring parents into the schooling process, just so that, as a start, they feel welcome in the building, so that there are parents at the door as greeters, there are parents involved in what happens in the classroom, either as observers or assistants, and there are parents even outside of the classroom, and Mr. Nemax can speak about this, as parent patrols, to make sure that it's safe for students to get to and from the programs. It's an extremely important part of the work that we do. So this is just a summary of these 3 levels again, and some specific programs that fall under those 3 levels of engagement: the Promised Child, Promised Educator, and Promised Family. And with that introduction, I'm happy to pass it off to the other panelists. Thanks for listening. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's hard to read. And I'm happy to make sure that you get it afterwards. Thank you.
We'll put it on the website.
Okay, great.
I don't have access to the computer, so there you
We'll give
have
you access to our
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Rudy Nemox. I guess I'm next. And actually, based upon my background and experience, I almost feel like I need to go last because some of the things that you're hearing in a preliminary way from the panelists here, I could kind of bring together at the end. But since we're seated this way, I'm going to go ahead and do my thing anyway. I began my career in public service in 1955 as a police officer and for a little while an officer of a Chicago fireman. And the things that we're talking about here now, folks weren't even thinking about that much in 1955, I can assure you. And by the way, when I moved in the 6100 block of Greenwood down the street here, I wasn't a kid, I was a grown man. So I've been around a long time, I've seen a lot. But the important thing that I can point out to you is the fact that over time, it has become quite apparent what the major ills are in these underserved neighborhoods and why we're fighting with drugs and gangs and so forth and so on. It's pretty apparent now. People now, scientists and sociologists and demographers and all those kind of people, they understand very clearly, and almost all the stuff that you read now is saying practically the same thing. But a pivotal point in time emerged when Jeffrey Canada in Harlem decided to attack this problem at the grassroots level and attack it in a different way than had ever been done before. And in so doing, he pointed out some very important points that we brought away from the Harlem Children's Zone. I was there, and Sam was there, and did you go, Cherie? No. But anyway, if any of you have a chance to go there and see what they're doing, you can discover real quickly what I'm talking about. But the bottom line and the essential thing that I should tell you is that he figured out that in order to change things in a underserved neighborhood, you have to change the mindset of the children. Now, anywhere you go and you get the signals about what kind of neighborhood you're in, the signals come from the children that are there, the young people that are there, the gangbangers, and the young men out there selling powder every day, trying to get by, and the young men who are out there trying to get identification in life, just like we are. But they do it in a different way. They do it with the skills they have available to them. But they do it anyway because they have the same aspirations as we do. I was a little gangbanger in the 40s, so I can understand the principles. But the difference then was that there were hardly no guns, no real guns, and no drugs hardly at all except marijuana. But when drugs and guns start to proliferate across our country, it changed the whole scenario. Now you have an underground economy that kids who have dropped out of school can get in a corporate entity and work their way up from the bottom and go all the way up to the top and become almost like rock stars. They get recognition in the neighborhood, they have a pocket full of money, and they get respect. And that's what most young people want. They want respect. I remember when I was a teenager, I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to stand out, and most of my homies back in those days felt the same way. They want to get recognized. They want people to see, well, here I am. And these kids feel the same way now. And that's why, after all this time, I firmly believe that the answer is through education. And by means of making these kids understand that they are in fact somebody rather than nobodies, that they are smart, and that they can go to college, and that they can finish college, and that they can get into the mainstream of society. That's how our neighborhoods and our society in America will change. And until that time, when we have these pockets of poverty and underserved communities with deficient health care, deficient education, and all the other deficiencies that we have around us, and like in Woodlawn, we're in trouble. So we're talking about a long-term proposition here. But I can assure you, any sociologist or educator around the country right now is talking the same kind of talk and postulating the same ideas that we're doing tonight about the importance of education. Barack Obama discovered it early in his presidency. And he decided that he wanted 20 cities around the country to do exactly what they're doing in Harlem. That's how impressed he was with what they're doing. And believe me, Barack Obama was on this campus. Some of the people around here know him. They know how he operates. He's a very deliberative, research-oriented guy. And he wouldn't have gotten up and made that pronouncement for everybody to hear unless he was firmly convinced it works. And I'm a skeptic by nature. Having played cops and robbers for 50 years and putting people in jail, I look under every rock. I'm just accustomed to doing that. But I'm firmly convinced that we're on the right track when you're reaching down to make sure all these kids get a good education. Another thing that I want to make very clear is the fact that one of the essential things we discovered with trying to bring these kids up is that you have to almost intervene before they're born. You have to get the mother on board with the idea that you're going to help the child when the child is born. They do that in Harlem. If a pregnant teenager or some person who is in a bad circumstance comes to the zone's attention, they will send outreach workers out to talk to that expectant mother and tell them what they have in mind. We're going to support you. We're going to support your child. We're going to give you the holistic kind of services that you require to make it through this life. And if you stick with us and you stick with your child, we'll make it happen. We'll make sure that your child goes to college and finish college. And that's what they do. And that is hard, very, very hard work. Very hard work. But they're doing it. It's possible. But you have to have the parent on board with the child, and they have to be brought along together. Because a lot of parents, I haven't encountered very many parents in my lifetime who aren't concerned about their children. Even the worst of the worst, deep down inside, they're concerned about how their children are going to end up. No matter how bad they are, crackheads or whatever, they have that instinctive concern for their children. But the hard work is to convince them that it's possible to change all that. Very difficult. Some of you folks who are in social work, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because it's like, yeah, well, I heard that before, and they don't do what you want them to do. But you have to stick with them, and you have to provide what is now the catch terminology, the holistic wraparound that families need. That's everything that they need. So I'm excited about it. And my title implies that I should be bringing people together, forming partnerships. I'm the director for community partnerships for the university. And I try to bring all these people together that are in our so-called pipeline of services in a collaborative way so we can be strong and make this thing happen. But we're convinced that it can happen. And I'll take your questions, because I could talk about this all night. So thank you. Yes, sir.
My question is, I lived in New York for about a year, and I saw the zone they have there. It seems very expensive when we talk about services for young people and being in a child's life before birth until they graduate from college. Where does, especially in our community where the budget is being cut, where do the funds come from for this type of program of this magnitude?
Well, I can relate to you what we were fortunate enough, the little group that I went to New York with, we were fortunate enough to sit around the table with Jeffrey Canada for about an hour and a half and almost interrogate him about some of the same things that you're talking about. Where does all this money come from? You're talking about a huge enterprise here. Well, he didn't initially get all the money that he needed, but he got it by proving that his ideas produced. And nowadays, people want to see, well, where are your provers? They want to see the protracted data to show that you got the kid here and he went there 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And what I'm trying to say is, he's at the point now where when he goes out to his funders, they ask him, Jeffrey, how much do you need this year? That's how confident they are that it works. What I'm saying to you is, there are people out there with money who will spend the money for this enterprise, but you have to convince them that you have something that really works. They want to see documentation. They want to see proof. Where are your provers? If you show them the provers, the money will come.
My concern is more, where is the money coming from? Because, who do you owe? We know, like for instance, in some schools that get funding, charter schools get funding from corporations. We know that there's a prison industrial complex that gets paid every time someone goes to jail. if we're funding education, it doesn't come for free. Who's giving the money, I guess, would be my question.
Well, in this country, there's a lot of people that have money. There are a lot of foundations that have money, and they have now become very particular about who they give money to. But the money is there. There's enough money to bring all the schools in this country up to the standards that we are talking about this evening. But they have to be convinced to spend the money. We meet with people all the time. Sam and I were with some other people downtown at one of the fancy, Union League Club, trying to get money from people who have money. They want to hear what are your ideas? What are you going to do? How are you going to do this? They have to be convinced that this money that they have is going to be well spent, because in the past, a lot of the money that they gave to folks, to nonprofits, 501c3s and all that, they gave it to them, but nothing really changed. So you have to show them that there's change here. But what's in our favor right now is that there's a lot of powerful people around this country who are talking about schools and who have come to the realization that there's something wrong with the American educational system. Why is it we're so far behind some of the Asian countries and other countries with far less money than we have? And they're way ahead of us in science and math. Why is it Chicago has the shortest school day in the entire country? So all these things make up that mosaic and get to the question that you're asking. It's not a simple answer to what you're saying. There's a lot of different answers, but the answers are out there. That's my point. Yes, ma'am.
I have a two-part question. One is I'm executive director of a literacy program. We do literacy in schools from pre-K to 6th grade. We're in Chicago Public Schools, but we want to be more specific about the schools we're in. For example, these 9 Woodlawn schools. How does a CBO get involved with the Promise community? How do we offer our services in connection with this?
How you get, well, it's kind of hard to hear you, but anyway, you said, how do you get involved with the Promise community? As a community-based organization, we're trying to partner up with several community-based organizations. And it really comes down to whether or not it's a fit with what you have and what we need, and whether or not we can identify the logistics and the money and all of that to make it happen. We've been talking to all kind of 501c3s around the country, preschool and, after school and you name it. And it's just trying to get these collaborations in place.
So is it simply reaching out and requesting a meeting with you?
Oh, absolutely. You can request a meeting with us anytime, because we're meeting with folks like you all the time. Right, Sam?
How do we reach you? How do we reach you? You're a community partner. How are we able to reach you?
So there are a couple things. I mean, we can certainly give you our contact information, and then we can put up a slide at the end that has that information, just so you can leave with it. But we are one among many neighborhoods aspiring to do this same kind of work. And in connection a little bit with the previous question about where the money is coming from, as Mr. Namax mentioned, there is a federal grant program, Promise Neighborhoods, that is seeking to put significant funds into these kinds of initiatives in neighborhoods. And there was a first round. There are 2 rounds of this grant program. The first round has already happened, and there is a record. If you go to the Department of Education website, they actually have information about the neighborhoods in various, or the organizations in various neighborhoods who have applied for this funding. Whether or not they've gotten the funding in the first round, in fact, none of the Illinois applicants got funded in the first round, which is a disappointment to the state. But in any case, it has a record of those organizations. It might be a tip.
Funding, and are there corporations involved in providing money?
Yes.
Well, let me kind of clarify that a little bit. Initially, when this program was announced by the president, it promised that if you were chosen as one of the 20 cities, the government would award you $25 million over a 5-year period. That's $5 million per year for 5 years. But you would also have to go out and raise a matching $25 million. So obviously, you can get some government money, but we also have to go out and find some private money in order to round out the package. That's a requirement of the grant that he's talking about. Now that Congress is fighting the president about how much, whether it's going to be 25 million, whether or not it's going to be 10 cities rather than 20, and they're going all over the place trying to diminish the idea. And I'm not talking politics, I'm talking facts. And we just sitting on pins and needles trying to figure out, well, what in the final analysis, what are we going to be able to get? Because right now we're not sure that it's going to be the 25 million. We're not sure it's going to be 20 cities. We don't know. So I hope that partially answers your question.
Please do ask questions, but please introduce yourself when you ask a question. Some of you may have thought that the gentleman to my left was looking familiar. Would you please introduce yourself?
My name is Shay Rhinefest Smith. I'm an alderman candidate and a runoff in this very ward. So very interesting to me, and I'm very intrigued by the Promise Zone.
Good. If that possible, we could get a walking mic, because some of the people back in the back, I don't know about you younger folks, but I can't hardly hear what they're saying. So
I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jerry Richards. I'm a community-involved person. I'm involved with the Hope Center at 3424 South State Street. And we have a program or a project that's called Housing Bronzeville. So I'm very interested in everything that happens in the community. I've raised 3 children. I'm a very mature grandmother. So I want to know what's going on. I agree.
well, good for you. We better keep going here, because we have 2 other presenters, and we're going to have time for questions afterwards, but we want to give them a chance to see what they want to say. Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, Rudy. Just want to make sure that we're going in the right sequence so that I can have my slide up. There we go. I'm James Dodson, and I'm board chair of Metro Squash. Just want to thank Rudy and also thank Bart for inviting me to participate in today's panel, this evening's panel. It's really an honor to be a part of the panel with so many people that I've been engaged with at some point over the last 6 months or so. Rudy especially, who's come on board, is now on the board of Metro Squash, but more importantly, I got to know Rudy over the summer as we launched, sponsored, hosted, ran the 1,000-man march in Woodlawn. And it was an extraordinary experience, having grown up in Chicago and participated in rallies, events like that. To have so many people come out during the summer, so many men come out during the summer to rally for jobs and letting folks know what services are available in the communities was very important, but it was a great way to get to know somebody. The invitation for me to participate today came out of a quick discussion at, I think it was January's Promise Possibility panel or discussion with Charles Payne. Bart and I had a quick discussion about, communications. Part of the reason for the 1,000-man march was to let folks know what's going on in the community, what services are available. And I was very excited to participate in the program because I could use my background, which is in public relations, communications, to engage the community, let folks know what's going on. But what I discovered in the process really was that there really is no communication, no means to communicate, no newspaper, no way to let folks know in a mass way what's going on in the community. And it really kind of kicked in, I think, when we had the event. What really turned the tide, if you will, in terms of letting folks know what's going on is when Rudy invited the mayor to participate in the event. And that really engaged folks. Folks paid attention. I should say the media paid attention. That's mainstream media in the city paid attention. And so folks came out. I want to swing back around with regard to the 1,000-man march and in Woodlawn. What brought me back to Woodlawn is Metro Squash, and that's the slide that's up on the screen now. Metro Squash is in essence, an after-school program that provides squash training with academic training, and also provides cultural enrichment and civic engagement. I got to ask you, how many of you know what squash is, the game of squash? All right.
I didn't know.
What do you say? That's about 25%? All right. Squash is an internationally played game. It's an indoor court game. It's actually the #1 sport for getting fit and staying fit. It's played mostly in boarding schools and private schools around the country in the U.S. But outside the U.S., it's played like basketball, soccer. It's very accessible. But in the States, believe it or not, there's an urban movement of squash programs, much like Metro Squash. Basically, we're on court. Kids are on court playing a game, one-on-one, very engaged, very physically engaged. But what we've discovered is it allows a way for the kids to have physical activity, but it also engages them, gives them some interest, something to get excited about. And we've been very great in using that to engage young people in academics. It's kind of the carrot that allows young people to want to study. And we've also added on to that by providing cultural enrichment. The kids go out and participate in tournaments around the country. They participate in all kinds of cultural events around the country. They've been to London to go to the training programs. And that's kind of that third piece. The fourth piece is civic engagements. Our young people have been involved with senior programs. They volunteered at senior programs. They volunteered at the food pantry here in Hyde Park. And in the 5 years that we've operated Metro Squash, we operate out of the University of Chicago, a Crown Gym over on University in 56, 7 days a week virtually. The kids are on court for an hour, they're in the classroom for an hour. In the 5 years we've done that, we've had an extraordinary amount of success. We now have young people who have been accepted to Hotchkiss, which is an elite boarding school on the East Coast. We have a young woman now who is probably going to go to Choate, another great school in the country. We've also, and I think what we're most proud of, is that our young people have been able to be accepted in a lot of the select private or public high schools in the city. I think for the most part, most of our kids have been able to go to much better high schools than they would have ordinarily have gone to, largely because we've been able to improve their grades and keep them active and show that they have the ability and capacity to be engaged. But Metro Squash has largely been supported by the university community. Many of you may have participated in some way. I know Chaz, you with the Neighborhood Community School, Community School Initiative, has had a lot of volunteers participate. And folks have come out and actually volunteered in the classroom. Students in the SSA have participated, as well as students in the business school throughout the university. But Metro Squash has been successful because of that. And I think in our 5-year period since we started, we hosted the U.S. Squash Championship in Millennium Park during the summer. We had about 90 of the world's best players participate and actually come out to the communities. We serve about 4 schools in the area, 2 in Hyde Park, and in Woodlawn we support and serve Fisk and the Woodlawn Charter School. And so the players came out, many of which are from the Middle East, from Egypt. The #1 players in the world are actually from Egypt. So many of those players came out and participated in a special program at Fisk to basically introduce them to squash and kind of encourage them to keep going and tell them more about their background, where they're from, how they got involved. But Metro Squash is, again, what brought me back to serve Woodlawn. We're now looking to build a program, to build a facility, a center, a home, if you will, for Metro Squash in Woodlawn at 61st and in Cottage Grove. And that's the story of Metro Squash. And I think what I want to add on to that is a bit about myself and why I'm so excited to be participating in this effort, and particularly this panel. I picked up the game of squash about 30 years ago when I was an intern, a fellow, if you will, for the Robert Kennedy Memorial Foundation in Washington, D.C. I was a reporter, and I covered Capitol Hill at age 18, covering educational issues. I worked for a gentleman named David Hackett, who had been Bobby Kennedy's best friend, Robert Kennedy's best friend, and he was the person who had worked out of the Justice Department to actually develop the demonstration programs that would become many of the programs referred to or have been associated with the war on poverty. You know, those early childhood programs and the Upward Bound programs. You know, these two programs particularly are still in existence. A lot of them have been just disbanded over the years. But, you know, two things. I like squash. I like communications, media. You know, covering Capitol Hill was extraordinary because most of us who were covering the Hill were just 18, 19, 20 years old. But we were reporting for a news service that was distributed throughout the country for high school students. And we were able to show that high school students could report on facts, things that mattered to them, to people that could get things done. Most of the information on federal spending we reported on, and that went to programs that served youth. They were able to basically go after federal dollars, state dollars, to support their programs. But again, all of this was done by youth. And it's something that we were able to expand upon. We had newspapers, media around the country that allowed young people or supported young people in creating media and communicating more effectively with the communities. Just to get back to the conversation with Bart, I mean, the possibility here in Woodlawn and what I've discovered, if I could just have the remote. You know, one of the things that we can do, and what we did actually in the community of South Shore, was allow young people to practice journalism. And in a positive way, I mean, provide information for their communities. In preparation for this panel, I looked at some photos that we did in South Shore. They were assigned to South Shore. But I realized after looking at them, these are things that actually happened in Woodlawn. You know, Woodlawn actually spans from King Drive to the lake. And these photos we thought we took, you know, out of South Shore, but this is Jackson Park. This is part of Woodlawn. This is a young person who, you know, is practicing golf in Jackson Park. You know, you got kids playing at the beach. You got this brother who's on guard, lifeguard, in a beach of Woodlawn. Now, this is kind of some of the positive things that get covered or can be covered by young people in their community. You know, it's simple things, but allowing young people to communicate, to practice journalism is one of the possibilities that I'd like us to think about as we think about this panel. You know, poverty, promise, and possibilities. Now, there's a lot of poverty in our community. There's also a lot of promise in the community. A lot of assets, if you will, such as the parks, the golf centers. There's also Fisk Elementary School, which has an association with Adobe, and they provide a lot of video content. Young people are actually out doing video programming. Apostolic, of course, is an extraordinary asset in our community. They also have, a fine broadcast facility, media facility. Not to mention, I guess tonight we have Kennedy King College participating. Yeah. Kennedy King has one of the most extraordinary, newest studios, broadcast studios in the area. These are all resources that provide the promise for our community. And the possibility is that we can use or kind of network these assets to provide a way of communication and a way of highlighting, acknowledge our communities, our community successes, primarily the children who will be participating in the Promise Zone. and all the events such as the ones Rudy and I worked on during the summer, the 1,000-man march, to ensure that residents of Woodlawn know what's going on and can be informed and active members of the community. I mean, these are some of the things that I kind of experienced just growing up in Chicago. I didn't grow up in Woodlawn. My parents were introduced in Woodlawn in 1946. Rudy, you said you were here in '52. But they were introduced. That's where the thought of me came about back then. But I realized a good friend of mine, one of my classmates at Howard, just finished a book on the migration, Isabel Wilkerson, Black Migration. And so I had a chance to catch up with her last week. But the things we take for granted. I realized that the house that my parents met was actually was a house that belonged to my aunt, 62nd and Vernon. And for the most part, my cousins tell me that practically everybody who came up through the migration from Louisiana, lived in that house or passed through that house at some time. I mean, it's probably one of the amazing stories that we hear about Woodlawn, about families in Woodlawn, that we should hear more about and can. But bottom line, when we moved off to Washington D.C., when I moved to Washington D.C. to practice journalism, I really was empowered to report back to these communities, to my home communities. But working with Hackett and this whole war on poverty really showed me that these opportunities like the Promise Zone really come extraordinarily infrequently. But when they come and the stars align, they really can have huge impact. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about the panel and what's going on here. You have a Promise Zone, which has the possibility of receiving federal funding at a huge capacity. We've heard a couple of numbers here. One is $25 million. That would be matched by another $25 million from private industry. The war on poverty, these demonstration programs that Hackett had been involved with, these guys, Kennedy had walked through Woodlawn, Hackett had walked through Woodlawn, Franklin Thomas, who became the head of the Ford Foundation, had walked through Woodlawn. They had similar programs like the Promise Zone in Harlem called Mobilization of Youth, a very similar way back then. Received federal funding, private funding, and really moved things forward. But that was 30 some odd, 40 some odd years ago. What we're going through now is a real possibility for extraordinary change. The Promise Zone is a real engine for change in this community. And I think there are other communities in the Chicago area that will benefit or will have something similar. But right here in Woodlawn, we have the capacity to get involved and participate and grow programs to support and feed our children, to support them in growing. And that's an extraordinary thing, I think. I'm happy to take more questions at the end, particularly about Metro Squash, which I'm very excited about. But thank you for your patience now.
I think this is probably the point at which I'm supposed to get up on the table and dance. Like that, okay. Well, I don't quite go to that extreme, but trust me when I say that I am passionate about what the Akarama Foundation is doing in Woodlawn. So I want to thank Bart for giving me the opportunity to be here tonight. And if you will, just let me take about 45 seconds to clarify the distinction between Alpha Kappa Alpha International and the Akarama Foundation. Alpha Kappa Alpha International is the organization for which all ladies like myself, college educated, are members of various chapters across the world. There are more than 260,000 of us who have the honor of being members of the sorority. I am a member of Theta Omega chapter, one of the graduate chapters. And the Akarama Foundation is the 501c3 arm of Theta Omega chapter. So it is a single chapters organization. And for many years, Theta Omega chapter moved about the city as if we didn't have a home. And the cost of renting a space for 400 to 500 women to come together to meet made no sense. So we had the good sense to say, we need to invest in property, give ourselves a home, take root in a community, and continue our program of service to all mankind. So in 2007, after much support from the city, the state, and members like myself who had to go into our piggy banks, we were fortunate enough to open the Akarama Center at 62nd and Ingleside. Now, in terms of what we have the good fortune to have encountered, is that when you listen to Sam talk about the programmatic initiatives of WCPC, you would think that he and Charles Payne sat in a room with the president of Alpha Kappa Alpha, Carolyn House Stewart, and said, this is what we are going to work on. Because our programmatic initiatives are aligned beautifully with what is the substance of WCPC. It was with that understanding in 2007 that we began to work with what was then NCP as they developed the design for what would ultimately become WCPC. So now with our center, we are in a position to continue our programmatic initiatives, but we have the good fortune to be in a position because with 380 members, all of whom have made their own mark within their careers, we have judges, physicians, attorneys, teachers, higher ed officers, state legislators. So we cover the gamut in terms of our professional experience. But what we are afforded as volunteers, because the Akarama Foundation, except for 3 people who on a daily basis, from 10 until about 9 in the evening, manage the operation of the center, we all work as volunteers without pay. So I sit here as director of community outreach, but please know there is no pay connected with that. But I told you in the beginning that our motto is service to all mankind. So in terms of what we do, we are no less committed and no less diligent in our responsibilities. But we can ask the questions that schools and community organizations frequently don't get. What is it that you need for us to do? So many times we come to fledgling initiatives to tell them what we're prepared to do for them, but not taking the time to find out what it is that they need for us to do for them. So in terms of our having the good fortune to be able to do that, that is how we are currently able to function. So when we get a call that space is needed to house the youth guidance initiative that is strengthening the collaboration of parents with their children's schools, we can say, we have space, we have time, and we welcome you. When DLA Piper, which is one of the major international law firms, commits to do pro bono legal service for the Woodlawn community, where are we going to do it? We need rooms, so that attorneys can meet confidentially with people who come seeking support and assistance. We need internet access so that we can access the materials and the tools that we need in order to carry on those kinds of conversations with people and determine whether or not their legal needs can be met. We need a place where people can come and feel welcome. So one of the things I do as Director of Community Outreach, I get on the phone, I consult with my sisters within Theta Omega chapter, and I say, we need you. Come out and support DLA Piper as they provide these professional services by welcoming the people who come and assisting in the registration. And we come, and we will continue to come, because what we recognize in the Akarama Foundation, of Theta Omega chapter, of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, is that we have not done our part if we are always looking elsewhere for the resources to do the things that are so valuable here in Woodlawn. Ironically, I grew up in Woodlawn, and my family was one of the families that left at a time when it was very difficult. Now, surprisingly, my husband and I have returned to Woodlawn. And why? Because it makes it a lot easier for me to get from our house over on Woodlawn to the Akarama Center so that I can be there to do what I can to help in this initiative. I have materials that I brought, and I purposely held on to them because I wanted to see your beautiful faces as I spoke. And I knew if I handed them to you, you'd be reading while I was talking. So now I'm going to pass them out, and what they will describe for you are the 6 current programmatic initiatives of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And as I said, you will be astonished when you see how closely they are aligned with the goals of the Woodlawn Children's Promise community. I thank you for inviting me. Our president, Essie Kelly, has asked me to greet you all on her behalf, and all of the information about how to get in touch with us, to volunteer to work with us, or just to come and see our center is on the handout. Thank you. Absolutely.
Okay, folks, so let's kind of open it up now, and don't be bashful. Speak right up. Yes, ma'am. Back in the back.
I'm Jennifer Bosch. I'm a Woodlawn resident, but I'm also the executive director of the Hyde Park Neighborhood Club, which is a youth community center in Hyde Park. And I don't know if it's a question that can be easily answered, but as a Woodlawn resident, I'm curious as to what you're seeing with the senior populations who are leaving the community, and then just the infrastructure of their housing and where they're living, and then people coming in as far as young people or families. Is the youth population growing in Woodlawn? And how the Promise community is anticipating that, or what you're thinking in terms of losing an older population that means something physically with the buildings and the places that they occupy, and what's coming, what you anticipate coming in.
Want me to answer that? Yes. We have in our framework, we have a housing committee, and it's a particular organization called We Can. And they've been in Woodlawn for, I don't know, 30 years or longer. And they are devoted to retention of affordable housing and Woodlawn, and they have a special emphasis on senior housing in Woodlawn. Now, this is a very influential organization that we work with. The executive director's name is Maddie Butler. She's on our board, very active, and she's done an extraordinary job over the past few years, past couple of decades, to make sure there is adequate housing for seniors. That's always a problem for, not only because people are advancing in age, but because the demographics in the neighborhood are constantly changing. But if you walk around Woodlawn and take an inventory of possibilities, you see a lot of vacant lots, a lot of undeveloped properties, a lot of properties that have been abandoned and that are begging for restoration. So we're not worried about not having enough housing. All we want to do is just hold on until the economy starts to take off again, and we're absolutely certain that this community is going to blossom. There are going to be a lot of additional rooftops as soon as the market opens up. And not only Woodlawn, all across the country, everything in housing now is pretty dormant because the finances are not there. But we've got all kind of inquiries from people who want to come in and develop, but they're waiting until the financial situation in the country improves.
And I guess I'm maybe not being clear, but maybe you answered as best as you could, in that my concern is that are there enough people? Can we get enough people to come into Woodlawn to raise young families so that it's an attractive place to be? Because I know there's on my block, there's certainly no shortage of housing. There's empty buildings and empty lots and spaces for people to move into, and there are economic challenges. So I worry about there being more people to replace those that are leaving and those that may be permanently dying off, so to speak.
Well, from talking to... Go ahead.
I neglected to mention that I had a 34-year career as an educator, retiring as a superintendent. And unless I'm mistaken, younger people looking at communities look at schools. So what is going on in terms of strengthening not only the content but the capacity of the schools within Woodlawn is a major key part of what impacts the very issue that you are identifying. So I think that everyone up here recognizes that strengthening the schools is very important in terms of people wanting to move in. Because as you come in with a young family, you don't come in thinking that 2 years from now, I'm going to be out of here. You would like to have the continuity in your child's education that we know ensures a more optimum outcome for them as over and against high mobility.
And there's one other area in which this is relevant to schools directly. One of the big challenges in the Woodlawn schools is not only is mobility, that is mobility of students and mobility of teachers. It's hard to find schools where the staff in that school is the same as it was 5 years ago. And so one of the ways in which this initiative could bring value to the community with respect to housing and also to the schools is to be able to recruit teachers and to provide incentives for purchasing homes or renting in the neighborhood so that there are opportunities for investment. And one of the pieces of advice that we got from the chief operating officer of the Harlem Children's Zone last spring when he came to speak with some teachers and community members, in Harlem, they got priced out of their neighborhood. Right. The Harlem Children's Zone started 20 years ago or so. Harlem was not a desirable neighborhood, but as soon as you turn schools around, they become desirable neighborhoods. That's right. And then the folks who have been there for the last 20 years no longer are able to afford living there. Mm-hmm. So I know this is a sort of a basic principle of community development that you need to ensure that you develop the community for people so that there is mixed income housing or what have you to ensure that folks can stay in the community after having invested there and raised families there for years.
And let me put an attachment on to that. For young families with kids who have limited resources, if they're going to go into a redeveloping neighborhood, there are two things they're going to be looking for. How do I know? Because I've talked to a lot of them who have moved into Woodlawn from up north. They were renting apartments. They moved out here because they could buy. There are two things that they're looking for. They're looking for excellent schools and excellent public safety. If you don't have those two things, forget it. Your community is not going to really redevelop. But if you have those two things in a solid configuration, I guarantee you they'll come in droves. Because anybody wants to send their kid to a public school where they don't have to pay $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 a year for them to go there, and they're still going to get a good public education. I guarantee you they'll come.
So another way to say it is that this is a good time to invest in Woodlawn.
Exactly.
I agree.
I have a quick question, a second part to my earlier question. Not only am I interested in partnerships, but I'm a parent of a toddler, a 2-year-old girl in Woodlawn, and I want to stay. But and so this promise zone is hugely important to me, and exactly what you're saying is true. I want to stay, but I need a good reason to stay. And so how, as a parent, can I get involved in the Promise community? Is there a parent committee or anything where we can volunteer our time for fundraising or do whatever we can to help this work?
Yes, there are lots of opportunities. I mean, there are individual programs that you can certainly support. Programs like the Promising Young Leaders and Readers that I mentioned that have students pair with students, but also adults. There are summer programs that we do that provide opportunities, but there are also committees to be involved in, like Housing Committee, you mentioned one. There's an Early Childhood Committee. One of the things we know about Woodlawn is that it doesn't have lots of good early childhood opportunities for students. And if you're going to do anything to improve the life of young people, it has to happen early. That's one thing we know. A University of Chicago economist has studied the question and found out that $1 of investment in early childhood yields or saves $7 in future expense. There aren't a lot of investments you could put $1 in and get $7 out later in that same time frame. And so we would love to have you meet Mr. Nimox's wife, Joyce Nimox, who's the chair of that committee.
Hello, my name is Bill Grayson. I own a home in Woodlawn, and I'm a Kennedy King student. The Children Promise community is a very important part of Woodlawn. Woodlawn being a vital community in the city of Chicago. I'm also a business owner. And what we look at in Woodlawn right now is bringing back vital businesses to this community so that we can invest in our children. Without having the business back in Woodlawn, which it used to thrive, the money to fund these programs are much harder. To fund these programs through the federal government causes for private industry to match these funds. What are we doing to bring back the businesses to the community? Are we underdeveloping the funds, the TIF money, and the other grants that have been appropriated to this community? Where's this money gone?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. We've had all sorts of businesses that we've invited to come in and take a look at Woodlawn. Some of the neighborhood organizations have done it. The Alderman's office has done it, and so forth. They all say basically the same things. If I'm going to establish a business in Woodlawn, I need to have some assurance that it's going to support my product, that there's enough money here circulating around in the neighborhood. There's enough potential here for me to locate. All the big box and all the the top line Dominic's and Walgreens, they all say the same thing. They do market studies. We've had several market studies done having to do with Woodlawn and also in North Kenwood, Oakland. The market studies are still there. They show that there's huge potential, but the time is not here yet because the money isn't there yet. But as soon as the rooftops come, as I said before, the business will follow, I guarantee you. But they will not come if they don't see the potential here in the neighborhood now. They don't gamble millions and millions of dollars, say, well, I guess they'll come later on. That's not the way they operate. We found that out the hard way.
One thing comes to mind, though. We have had conversations with folks at Walgreens about supporting the health and wellness initiatives that we had. And one of the things that I learned in that conversation is that they're trying to sell fresh produce in their stores to remedy the food desert problem that we have. And one of the stores in which they're doing that is on Stony Island in Woodlawn. And so I know that there are some businesses that are actually looking already at opportunities for investment. And I think we should be asking this question of our new mayor. Because he's talked about trying to do initiatives like those that have happened at the federal level to invest large sums of money into innovation and into development. And community engagement is an important part of his platform and education as well. So I think that's an area that Woodlawn's voice needs to be heard on that issue.
Mm-hmm. Yes, my name is David Jolly. I'm a student at Kennedy King. I want to ask you a question. I heard he said that education and safety is the main objective. What did you plan on doing now since the state is cutting the budget about after school care for the kids in Woodlawn? And what about the crime? Do you have any plan for that?
Well, crime is my specialty. I can talk about that. I can really talk about that. Well, let me put it this way. The police department right now, and I spent 33 years in the Chicago Police Department. When I retired, I was a deputy superintendent. So I've been from the bottom to the top. When I started in 1955, they didn't even assign black policemen and white policemen to the same squad car. And we only had 6 black sergeants and 1 black lieutenant in the entire Chicago Police Department. So I've seen a lot of policing. But to get to your point, right now the city is having budgetary problems like a lot of other municipalities around the country. I think we're about maybe 1,500 police officers short. And the one thing that I've learned over all these years of playing cops and robbers is that don't expect the police to solve all your problems having to do with criminality. It's impossible. They cannot do it. There's not enough of them, and it's too complicated for them to take the whole burden on by themselves. But if you have a neighborhood that is on the same page, and they're working together, and they're working in collaboration with the police, no matter what kind of police you have, you're going to get results. And the criminality that you experience in a neighborhood and the tolerance for that criminality is perceived by the young people in it. If they come to the realization that they can't get away with this, you can't get away with that, this lady's going to call the police, that lady's going to call the police, they're going to testify in court, they're going to come and point you out, that's when the crime goes down. But until that happens, until you get that strong collaboration between the cops and the people that live in the neighborhood, then you got a hard road to hoe, believe me. But togetherness is it. It works. I've seen it work time and time again. But you got to step up. You got to take a day off from work. You got to go to court. You got to testify, and you got to call the police.
And you mentioned funding for after school. Certainly we are concerned by any cuts in that because CPS is one of the investors in this work through community schools initiatives. Community schools manager is sitting there. Hi, Tina. And so that's a concern for us, certainly. And I think it's one of the reasons why, having conversations about organizations like Metro Squash is important, to make sure that there are things for students to do when they're not in school that are engaging. So, and of course, that's one of the motivations behind ongoing fundraising with other entities beyond state and publicly funded entities.
Well, good evening. My name is Nicole Thurman, and I'm a student from Kennedy King. And I would like to know, would you have a program for the mentally challenged? And why is the Woodlawn area a target instead of the other hardcore schools in the Chicago city?
What was the question again?
Mental health. Yeah, could you repeat the question once more?
I would like to know, would you have a program for the mentally challenged children? And why is Woodlawn targeted and not the hardcore areas of the Chicago city?
You mean, when you say targeted, you mean that Woodlawn has been singled out? Okay. As not having enough resources for challenged children? Oh, I see. All right. Okay. I get it. Well, it may have to do with community activism. It may have to do with what we're doing in order to get those resources. We don't have enough to address the kind of problem you're talking about. We have a lot of challenged children in classrooms, and the teachers just say, well, that's the way he is, or that's the way she is. We don't have enough counselors in the schools. We have maybe one counselor that goes around to 3 or 4 schools, and they may see her once or twice every 2 weeks or something like that. We know that's not enough. We know that we need school-based health services. We know that we need a clinic right in the schoolhouse where you don't have to refer a child to go to, here, there, and yon to get services. It should be available right in the schoolhouse. That works. We have a school right across the way from us in Grand Crossing that has it's called a Coma Youth Center. They have a clinic right in the schoolhouse. They can take a kid from the classroom right down, get them examined, get them evaluated for whatever they need. We can get that here, but it takes time, it takes activism, and it takes money. But that's what it takes. That's the answer to your question.
Could I add just a little something to that? Sam alluded to the origin of what is now WCPC, and it grew out of a citywide initiative that covered 16 communities across the city. And the Englewood, Auburn, Gresham community is one comparable community initiative. Now, here in Woodlawn, we're focusing on Woodlawn, but in terms of accessing the information about what is going on within the Englewood, Auburn, Gresham community NCP initiative, that could be accessed on the internet, and their proposal, their design, and what they're doing in that community would be shared with you there. Mm-hmm. Okay, but we aren't up on what that is, but we do know that it exists. Now, in terms of special needs children, the mandates of the state of Illinois speak specifically to what should be happening in the lives of children with special needs. So in terms of advocacy programs within the Early Childhood Development Committee here in Woodlawn, I serve on that community with Mrs. Nimox, and we do look very closely at the kinds of supports that need to be in place to ensure that all of our children are receiving the best education possible, without exception and without exclusion. So that speaks to the need for parental supports and the kinds of people that have been coming in to share with us the resources that are available for children with special needs and how to access those resources. And let me just take the opportunity to say that would be a point where the Akarama Foundation membership can be effective, because many times parents are very uncomfortable navigating the special education placement process. But to have an advocate who is familiar with that process, there with you, to help you to understand, to advise you without concern for how many children do we need so we can hold on to that teacher that we have in room 205, not being concerned with those kinds of issues ensures that the needs of the children remain uppermost in the minds of the people at the table.
And it looks like this might be the last question,
Yeah.
but one...
A number of the students from Kennedy King will have to get going here, as will the panel, so I'm going to hang on this side.
Just one response here. One specific way in which we're trying to address the few resources that exist in the mental health area is to ensure that in schools there is an increase in the typical allocation of clinical supports. And that's something that we can sort of band together, because we are this network of schools, or working with a network of schools, to say we need more than the typical number of social service supports or social workers or psychologists or what have you in the schools. And that's one of the ways in which we encourage other initiatives like this to band together and argue for increased supports in that area.
As a matter of fact, we have some graduate students right from School of Social Service Administration right here who are acting as supports in that kind of effort in our schools, in our 9 schools. Yes, sir.
My name is Harold Neighbors. I'm a student at Kennedy King. I have a 2-part question. First of all, I see a lot of children that you basically have shown have been basically in the, what they may say, the phallic stages of life, between the ages of 3 to 6. What about those that are in the latency stage between the ages of, I would say, 7 to about 12 years of age? When they can be reached, they're like at that borderline stage, you know, where they're are looking at individuals as their heroes and the gangbanging and so forth. And how would you deal with those in the older adolescents, such as those between the ages of 13 to 24? I don't know if you still would define them as children. I guess not. But how would you work with them as far as in the stages of positive youth development?
Mm-hmm. You want to answer that, or you want me?
Yeah, one. I mean, you mentioned 7 to 12-year-olds, sort of middle school age, or around that area. We had a summer university program. We will likely think about changing that name so it's more appealing to young folks in middle school who want to be engaged in a program during the summer. But during this past summer, that was a target. The middle grades, 6th through 8th grade, was a target age, particularly because of the opportunity to reach students at that age who are really making life choices that are going to impact them down the road, and as a way of increasing their chances of successful entry to high school, which we know is so important. So that you mentioned a couple different age ranges, but that's one area in which we've tried to pay particular attention as students are getting ready. And I had another point which is escaping me.
If I could just add, I mean, with programs like Metro Squash, in essence, you know, an after-school program with a mentor program combined, I think is ideal for capturing that 7 to 12-year-old category. We could, you know, we'd like to start earlier, but just in terms of physical development, age 7 is working out fine for us with regard to their ability to hit the ball on the squash front. We've engaged them. You know, we've obviously used the game of squash to engage them, to take them on to higher educational endeavors and also cultural enrichment programs. But again, that 7 to 12-year-old age group is perfect for us. We get them on court, get them in the classroom, and then we have mentors who work with them to, you know, listen to them primarily. If they have an interest, a career interest, we try to tie someone or link them to someone with that career to take them farther. But that, you know, again, I think what's key for that age group and engagement is, you know, an after-school program that takes up their time and provide, programming to keep them engaged, or whether it's, sports like squash or a program in journalism. And I think that's what's necessary.
But a key element in that kind of scenario is the fact that you make an accurate assessment of what exactly is troubling that at-risk child. Because a lot of times you just take this superficial approach to the child's problems. Well, we're going to put them in this program. You don't go deep enough. And if you go deep enough, usually you can find out what's really troubling that child. And it isn't always what it seems to be. It could be something completely you're not even thinking of. And that's where people make a lot of mistakes trying to intervene in a process like that. And mind you, the negative contemplation that they have for their future is very attractive, especially at that age. I can get recognition. I can make a lot of money out here selling drugs. I can have my homies with me. I can be the man and all that. It's very enticing for kids at that particular age group. Very enticing, and so many people just don't understand that. They think that they all understand that what they're doing is wrong. They don't. It's something that they can do and they can be successful at. And when you come to that realization, then you're ready to go after the problem.
And I think key to helping students is not just doing things for them, providing resources, especially when they come from the hands of adults, but putting them in situations where they are helping and connecting to one another. I think a key point, one of the things that we learned through this summer experience is that there are students who were working together at schools that they didn't normally attend during the year, forming new communities. I think one of the big eye-opening experiences for me in Woodlawn, I did not grow up in Woodlawn. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. Woodlawn, we talk about the Woodlawn community, but people who live here understand that from a young person's point of view, their community is a couple blocks big because they don't feel safe to travel outside of that space necessarily. And the extent to which we bring people together to form communities and identify themselves as connected to each other, whether it's itty-bitties connected to older elementary or just, peer-to-peer, that's powerful in the community because people start thinking about and acting like a community.
And people talk about, well, I want to be a mentor. And I have a lot of young policemen that I've talked to. They say, well, I'd like to mentor, get involved in this mentoring program. And I ask them, are you prepared to take these telephone calls 3 o'clock in the morning? Are you prepared to go down and get this young man out of jail? Are you prepared to be almost a member of the family and take on all the responsibilities of that family? That's what mentoring, real mentoring, is all about. Not twice a week taking them to the movie or taking them to the ball game. That's just a superficial puff piece. That's nothing. That's not real mentoring. And a lot of people don't understand that either.
Could I just take a quick second here to introduce a fellow who's doing who's got a wonderful project in Englewood here, bearing on education that people might be interested in.
Thank you, Bart. My name is Tom Hale. I'm the president of the board of the Montessori Network. And first of all, I'd like to thank the leadership of the efforts that are going on in Woodlawn to inspiring other efforts that are going on outside of Woodlawn in the neighborhoods. We are working in Englewood, and we've been there for several years at Stagg Elementary School. We opened and are running early childhood education and young elementary school classrooms, and we just got approved for a charter to open in Englewood. So not only are we looking at education and early childhood education, but bringing in resources, both human and financial resources, to the neighborhood to address the issues that have been talked about here, beyond education, bringing in healthcare, adult education, and the various issues that were talked about. So thank you, Bart.
My name is Jeffrey Doman, and I work for a construction company that's doing Chicago Public School renovation and Chicago Housing Authority projects. And I just wanted to know where would I find some qualified contractors or subcontractors in the Woodlawn area that we could use on some of our projects. Just so for people, as a point of information, the Chicago Public School renovation program just this year alone, we'll have over $200 million, worth of, their projects. So there's tremendous potential and opportunity, and I'm sure some of that will be coming in the Woodlawn area. But from a construction company standpoint, we would like to know, are there companies here that can do this work, for us or with us? And also, is there a training program in construction? Because again, this field, I think, has tremendous opportunities, for the future.
If you would talk to me after the meeting, we have a guy named by the name of Andy Skolnick on our board. He's a neighborhood developer, and he knows a lot of subcontractors that fall in that category. And there's also the entity that I talked about before, the Gary Comer Youth Center on South Chicago Avenue. They had a lot of minority subcontractors working in that neighborhood. So I can hook you up. Just stick around after the meeting and give me your information.
I just had a quick question. Hi, my name is Vanessa Davenport, and I'm a student at Kennedy King College, and Professor Harrison is my sociology teacher. I just had a quick question in regard to the parents. Just say if you're a new parent in the Woodlawn neighborhood, how do we go about seeking out those particular programs that could be of interest to helping our children? Because I have 2 teenagers here, and I'm just wondering, like, where do we start? How do we seek out, like, the programs where they can be the most productive in the schools and after-school programs and just things to keep them engaged?
Are they in school in Woodlawn?
Not yet. We just come over, and we're just wondering, where do we start?
I would start with wherever your local neighborhood school is, your closest school. You can also come to Apostolic Church. The office of Woodlawn Children's Promise Community is in the church, and either of those places I would think would be able to give you a great start.
There are lots of programs afoot now in the neighborhood where your daughters could fit. But I think the best way to get hooked up, as I put it, is at the Woodlawn Children's Promise office at Apostolic Church, 63rd, and we're right on the first floor.
Okay. Gentleman says he has some great news to wrap up.
I've got fantastic news.
Okay.
There's billions available in the city of Chicago, and it was revealed to us by guess who? The Pentagon. The Pentagon spent $1 million on a report that world oil production will go down 14% in the next 10 years, which will be catastrophic. But the good news is that jet fuel prices and airline tickets will go up so high that we're going to need to contract O'Hare, not expand it, which means there's going to be up to $5 billion available if you'll just tell your alderman to vote to stop the spending on O'Hare and spend that money here in the city where it's needed. Thank you. Oh, incidentally, I'm Mo Shamfield. I ran for Congress on the Green Party ticket up on the north side in 2008.
Thank you.
Well, this is a community forum, all right. We're going to continue the conversation. Got another one coming up in April. Please come back again, okay? Thanks.
Thanks.